So one of the most important pieces of foundational groundwork that you're going to lay before you embark on a new promotional program is to determine some of your key performance indicators, because your key performance indicators will help you make decisions about which promotional campaigns can and should be scaled up and which should be scaled down or cut out altogether. So I'm going to run you through these numbers really quickly. We're going to focus first on these cells on the left, starting with these yellow highlighted cells here. In C5, you see a row called average order value. By the way, for the moment, don't worry about these cells here on the right. We'll get to that in a second. The intention of these cells on the left is to determine your ACPA, which is your allowable cost per acquisition. Allowable cost per acquisition is just another way of saying allowable cost per new customer or per new client, right? And if you're a charity, you'll be, of course, talking about donors. And if you're a brokerage house or something like that, you'll be talking about investors. But for the purpose of our exercise, we'll call these clients. Allowable cost per new acquisition of new client, that's the number we need. And that number will help us in the future. And I'll show you in a minute how. So the average order value is the first piece of data we need. What is the average order value? Well, let's just say, for example, you have an insurance company, and the average transaction value for you is $25. That's what it's worth to you. Now, their premiums might be higher, but that's what you make on it. So that's what we'll enter here. So let's just enter $25 just for illustration purposes. And now the next question is average lifespan periods. This is how long do you expect the relationship to last? Well, let's just put 10 years as a number there to start with. And of course, the periods doesn't have to be years. They can be days, weeks, months, or lifetime. You could put one there if you're only going to do one transaction. And so in the insurance illustration, how many transactions are we going to do per period, per year? Well, we're going to do 12 because we're going to do one transaction a month. People pay their insurance bills once a month or once a year, and for those people that prepay. But what that gives us is the number of transactions over the lifetime. That's a self-calculated field. You don't need to touch that one. Again, only enter data where the cells are yellow. And so the transaction over the lifetime is 120. And notice that it pre-calculated for us the lifetime value. This is what the new customer, new client is worth to you over the course of the lifetime. $25, a 10-year relationship, and one transaction per month over that period gives us 120 transactions, and 120 times 25 equals 3,000. That's what a new client is worth to you. So what are you willing to spend to acquire that new client? Now, a lot of businesses make the mistake in saying, well, I'm only making $25 in that first transaction, so I can't afford to spend more than $25. Well, the mistake there, of course, is to limit yourself to only $25, and which means that most of your competitors are going to be outspending you, which means you can never dominate your market. The more you can afford to invest to acquire a new customer or client, well, the easier it is going to be for you to dominate your market. So the next highlighted cell is your allowable cost. And what I want you to do, however, is I want you to think about this in terms of maximum allowable cost. This is not what you want to pay. This is the very most you will pay before saying no and simply turning it off. And you can enter this in the form of percentage. So for example, if you were to enter 1% here, notice that your ACPA was automatically calculated for you at $30. Now, in this case, because they're worth $3,000, you might say, well, gee, they're going to be paying me $25 a month. For the next 10 years, I can certainly afford to pay more than $30. This would be the case, for example, for ADT or alarm companies. You sign up on these alarm monitoring service contracts, and they know that they've got you for years. And so, if that's the case, you might say, well, gee, I can afford to spend, 15% of the lifetime value. And if I invest $450, I understand that not every client is going to be worth $3,000 to me. Some are only going to be worth $1,000. But some will be worth 10,000. On average, they're going to be worth 3,000, and so it's very, very important that you do work out an average lifetime value. And if you need to be conservative with that number, that's fine. But just don't base your entire calculation on the lowest common denominator. Somebody who's going to start up with you for 1 month and then move out of the area and decide to change insurance providers 2 weeks later. That's not normal, and so don't base your calculations on that type of a scenario. Do base it on lifetime value, and that's going to give you your best shot for success. And so your maximum allowable cost is the maximum that you're willing to invest to acquire one new client. And at 16%, you would decide then to walk away. And so coming up with this maximum allowable cost in advance today, right here, is helpful because it removes emotion out of the equation down the road when you're running a promotion and it is working. It is producing phone calls and it is turning into new clients. It's tempting to let something run even though it's costing you more than you can afford to spend. And that's why it's absolutely necessary to think about this in terms of maximum allowable. At what point do you shut it off? And so for the purpose of our illustration, I'm going to come back down to, say, 12%. That's $360. Okay, so that's the absolutely maximum we're willing to spend to get a new client in the door. And once you've got that number, you're ahead of the game. Most people never make it this far in terms of their calculations. They never work this kind of stuff out, and so you're already ahead of them. Imagine your competitors spending that much money. They'd probably blow a gasket if they thought they had to spend that much because they just haven't figured out what the lifetime value is. And now that you know that, you can easily justify this expense. All right, now we're going to go over here to the right-hand calculations, and we're going to work out some of these other key numbers, and you'll see how these unfold in a second here. Now, these yellow highlighted cells are the ones I want you to fill out. First is and by the way, this is based on a online internet funnel, your website traffic funnel. And of course, these calculations would change based on the type of promotion you're doing. If you're doing trade shows or something else, then these numbers would change. But this is for illustration purposes to show you how this breaks down and how to use the model. And then you can feel free to alter it for your purposes after we're done here. All right, let's assume for a moment we're going to get 1,000 people to our website. And if the number of people that come to our website that convert into appointments is 1%, we would end up with 10 appointments out of 1,000. Well, you might say, well, that's far too low. I know we get far more appointments than 1%, so let's change this number to 3%. So for example, if you change it to 3, all of a sudden you can see that you're getting 30 appointments out of the 1,000, and so just work this number until you're comfortable that you've got something that's actually reasonably close to what actually happens or could happen. And I realize that if you're in the early days of your business, you may or haven't been calculating these numbers for any amount of time. You may not have historical data, and this might be a pure guess, but an educated guess at this point is better than no guess at all, so do enter a number there. Now, out of the appointments that you get, not everybody shows up for appointments, obviously, and so you're not going to do 30 presentations. What I want you to do is come up with a percentage here for the number of people that will actually show up. So I'm going to enter 80%. So we have something to work with. And then out of everybody that shows up for their appointment, and that could be on the telephone or in person, you're not going to be able to give quotes to everybody because you're going to find some people that simply aren't qualified, or they'll tell you they're not interested early into your presentation. And so you may only give out quotes to 75% of the people that you do presentations for. And out of the people that you send quotes to, you're not going to probably won't close 1%, but neither will you close 100%. You might close anywhere from 10% all the way up to 70%. It really just depends on your business. For our purposes, we're going to put 30% there. Okay, now that we've got these numbers filled out, you're done your work. Now what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at these blue numbers. So for example, F11. $1.94 is based on these calculations that we just worked out. This is how much we can afford to invest to get one new visitor to the website. So you see what you've just done is you've worked out a maximum allowable cost per new site visitor. And this is helpful if you're going to do some pay-per-click advertising like AdWords or Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that. Well, all of a sudden you can determine your outside limit on what you can afford to bid per click. You can do this in advance. And now, of course, we don't want to spend this maximum. We want to spend less, far less, and but this gives us the upper limit. And if our clicks are costing us $2, we know we've got to move on and look for something more affordable because we've already in advance worked out our maximum allowable cost. And thus, the maximum allowable cost has dictated how much we can afford to spend on a site visitor. All right, this next cell down here in F13 is, it says $64.80. That's how much we can afford to spend per appointment. And $81 is what we can afford to spend per presentation. And $108 is what we can afford to invest to put out one quote. So we've just run through the numbers, and as you can see, it's very helpful in terms of evaluating whether a promotion is successful or whether it is unsuccessful. And if you find that your promotion is unsuccessful, you don't necessarily have to shut it off right away, but it does tell you that you must optimize it. Never just set and forget your promotions. Always be optimizing, and these numbers give you the cue as to when you must absolutely focus on optimizing and or shutting something down. And when you get some promotion that's producing new customers at less than your allowable cost per acquisition, then that gives you a signal that you can scale that. And then at that point, you would invest as much money as you can, as much capital as you can find to scale your business. So you've got a model here for evaluating your ad budgets, your performance of your advertising campaigns, and for dictating decisions as to when to shut campaigns off and when to scale.